What did we learn yesterday?
A lot.
What did we see? What concepts did we use? What terms stuck out to you guys? What were your light bulb moments?
Get element by ID.
Get element by ID. What's get element by ID do, Jen?
You're pretty much reaching into the HTML and plucking out what ID you want.
Exactly, yes. We also learned a companion to get element by ID, which is get elements by tag name, right? And when we used that one, it was a little different. Instead of getting that one div back that we were looking for, we got a whole list of divs back. We got all the divs or all the items, the buttons they happen to be that we were looking for. And so the problem is we can't just say, oh, attach an on-click to that whole list. We have to go through the list and attach it to each individual item. And so that's when we started our for loop, and we started iterating through that loop to attach that listener to each individual one. And once we got that done and working, we were like, oh, but hold on, the equal button, that needs a different one. We want that to do something different when we click on that. So what we did is we wrote our if statement to say, hey, if the inner HTML of this button equals the equal sign, then onClick does this separate function. Otherwise, else it does this other thing. We saw onClick for buttons in two different ways, right? We saw how in our JavaScript, we could attach an onClick to a function, but we also saw in our HTML how we can add an onClick to the button itself as an attribute and have that reach in to execute the function in our JavaScript. We learned the very important acronym DRY, don't repeat yourself. And unfortunately in HTML, there are times that we just have to do that, right? When we're building multiple HTML pages, like in your capstone, and you want that same nav bar to be on all your different pages, you need to repeat that HTML snippet over and over and over again. So when we get into React, we are going to learn how we can make what we call a component that can be imported and reused on multiple pages, so we don't break that DRY, don't repeat yourself rule. Amberlynn, notes for sure. It is really important. You guys have heard me say this before. You'll continue to hear me saying it. 3 hours is a lot of time to sit in class, and it still is not enough to let it all absorb. Anyone have me invade their dreams or nightmares yet? Oh, good. My voice, I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's not you though. It's JavaScript. It's not you. It's like the waitress dream where you're like, I can see it all, but I can't read it and I don't know what it's doing. And yeah, oh my God.
It's probably more horrifying than, like, you know, going to present in front of the class and you're only in your underwear. The JavaScript dreams, I think, are even worse than the underwear dream. So that is okay. That is all part of it. Everyone learns differently. And again, if you are someone who is learning better from taking notes, don't feel guilty about not coding along. What you'll probably find is this nice hybrid where you can code along and then put the notes directly inside of it. You do your inline comments, get to that level of understanding. And if my notes, do not take my notes for verbatim, right? Everyone understands this a little differently. That's okay. Notes, definitely super important. We also talked about a monospace font, how I don't think I mentioned this yesterday, but almost all code, almost all text editors use a monospace font. And that, believe it or not, makes it easier to debug. So if you ever look at code in Times New Roman, it just looks wrong, right? It's like, why is there a console, a period, and the word log? That just doesn't quite look right. But as soon as you put it in a monospace font, the period takes up the same amount of space as the E and the L on either side of it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that code is much easier to read. For whatever reason, physically, it is actually easier on our eyes to read monospace font because each letter of the syntax is so important. We did our for loop and our if else. hint answer to the quiz for this week. What do we need when we're looping over a list or an array of data? We need a for loop. Computers are really bad about saying, hey, go do this thing for the whole list. Instead, what we do is we have to go through each item in the list, and then we can do something like it. Palash, glad that translating the code into plain English is helping. I will try to continue to add in the comments as we're going. And the other thing is, as we get into more and more advanced code, it's not just about the sentence about what it's doing, it's numbering each one of the steps, because the order that we write it in is not the order that the computer runs it. So going through and following through, some people love it when I start drawing on the screen and draw arrows from this to this and connect it. Some people hate that, and they think it looks too complicated. Oftentimes it's easier to understand when you see the line being drawn, and then if you go back to review it, you're like, this makes absolutely no sense. But sometimes the visual with the auditory explanation is what helps it click. Because when I'm here just talking about all this stuff, reviewing about it, that's totally different than looking at the code and going through it, which is totally different than leaving notes or numbering it, or maybe old school here, I've got 3 printers in my office. I print stuff out all the time, especially as a junior developer. When I get a project done, in order to fully understand it, I print out 5 pages of the code, and I probably look like a serial killer or something. I tape it up on my wall, and I start drawing lines between them, right? It's really hard on the computer to put your HTML next to your JavaScript and draw a line from one side to the other side. But if you print that code out, you can literally scotch tape the 2 pieces of paper together and start drawing lines between it to understand how that all connects. Anything else from yesterday? Any light bulb moments in particular that you guys want to share? Anything that you're struggling with still that you would like me to review? All right, then we are going to go ahead and dive back in. We are mostly done with our calculator project. So just like what we did for day 1, we're going to do that for day 2. We're going to finish up day 2 here, and then we will make a day 3 for our weather project, which we're going to be coming back to. So I'm going to say my day 2 and drag that into my VS Code. I am going to hit my go live button. I will start a live share for you all and give you a minute to jump into that. You guys are getting all that set up. I got one thing to pull up. Looks like most of you guys are in. Make sure you've got your own code open. Okay. So we're going to dive in where we left off. Just to review, we had our script all set up to go through and say, hey, down at the very bottom of the screen, we said get all elements by the tag name button. And once I have my button, I'm going to store it in this variable called all buttons. But when we console logged out all of our buttons, we saw that it was an array. And when we look at that array, we know it's an array because when we pop it, oh, actually, we don't know it's an array. I thought what was going to, oh, there we go. When we look at it in the console, we see these square brackets. Whenever we see a square bracket in JavaScript, we think array. So instead of just being able to throw our onClick function onto all of the buttons, instead what we have to do is loop over each one of our buttons to get each individual button out. I may have modified this code a little bit since last time. I think before I called it just button. You can leave it as individual button. I renamed this variable just to be a little bit more clear to show what we are looping over. So then we came into the for loop and we said, well, what do we want to do for each one of the buttons? We want to check to see if the individual button that we're looping over has the equal sign inside its inner HTML. And if it does, we link it to this equal pressed function. Well, where's that equal pressed coming from? We made that equal pressed up here. Otherwise, for any of the other buttons, go ahead and put on the button clicked. So I come back over to my code and I say 3 + 6, and I hit the equal button, and all I get is equal pressed. If you guys don't have equal pressed in your console, raise your hand now, and I can help you get caught up on your code from last night. Okay, doke, then we're going to power through here. So we're in equal press, and now we got to pause. We stop speaking JavaScript and we take off our programming hat and we think like an engineer. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right, how do I get this to actually happen? How would I say in English, I want you to do what an equal button is supposed to do? Okay, well, that's not quite close enough. What do I want to say? I want to say, take whatever is in the screen here, evaluate out what is in the screen, then take whatever is in that evaluation and make it be in the screen instead of whatever's in there. So that is 3 separate steps. So we plan that out before we write a line of code. I'm going to say, get the screen, evaluate the text in displayed in the screen, and store the result. Make the result show up in the screen instead of the input that's already there. That is way more verbose than the code itself it's actually going to take to do that. But now that we've broken it down into the 3 steps, it becomes much easier because we say, get the screen. Wait a second, we know how to get the screen because we got element by ID screen. We can actually take this whole line of code and just copy and paste it down into our get the screen. Okay. Now evaluate the text displayed in the screen and store the result. Well, this is actually in reverse, right? Whenever we store something, we do our variable first. So I'm going to say const result, and it be specific in my variable naming. So if anyone else reads this code, they know exactly what's in that variable. And I know how to get the text displayed in the screen because that is screen that we just got from our element by ID dot inner HTML. Okay, now how do we evaluate it? Well, we say JavaScript evaluate. And the first thing that comes up, MDN. And if you don't like MDN, you can come over to W3 Schools. And there's an example here of, hey, they have some number And what they want to do is evaluate whatever is in that string. Well, before we can even evaluate it, let's just make sure this is working. Let's just console log out our screen.inner HTML. So I save that, I come back over, I pop this open, I type something in, and I hit equal, and I have my 9 times 6 showing up. Okay, we're on the right track. I come over here and I say, what happens if I evaluate that? And instead of logging out the screen inner HTML, I'm going to log out the result. So we take a breath here and we go, before we even test this, let's make sure we understand what's this syntax doing. Eval is a word that is built into JavaScript. And we know that because there's documentation on it at W3 Schools and at MDN. And it even says the eval method evaluates or executes an argument. An argument and parameter are related. That is whatever is between the opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis. So those parentheses are not only saying, hey, go do this actual function or action, it's also saying, hey, in order to be able to execute that, in order to be able to run that function, you need some additional information. In this case, eval needs to know what it is evaluating. Now eval is going to work under the hood. It's going to go do that JavaScript thing for us, and it's going to return the result and store it in a function, in a variable called result. Now that we have that result, we console log it out. So I come back over here, I type in some numbers with an operation, I hit equal, and what do I get? I get 9. Okay. Get the screen. Got it. Evaluate the text displayed in the screen. That's this part. And then we evaluate it and store the result. That's this part. So even though this is one line of code, it's really doing 3 steps. It's getting the inner HTML from the screen. That's step 1. It's evaluating out what's in that screen. That's step number 2. And 3, it's putting it into the result. So we do all of that work. Now make the result show up in the screen instead of the input that's already there. Okay, well, we can say screen.innerHTML, forget about whatever is in there, and instead show the result. Again, it's always the right side of the equal gets sent in to the left side of the equal. No matter where we use a single equal, double and triple equal is a little different. That's comparison. But for a single equal, we always take what's on the right side of it and put it in to what's on the left side of it. So I save that. I come back over here. I try and type something in. I hit equal, and it works. Palash, what's up?
So the inner HTML returns like everything in a text string, right? How is it like evaluating it? Like 3 plus 9, like if 3 and 9 are added as a string, won't it be 39? See what I mean?
It doesn't treat it like a string. When you use the eval function, it converts the string as if the string itself were JavaScript. So if you did, console log 3 plus 9 here, you would get 12, right? Now, if you did this as a string, 3 plus 9, then you would get 39, right? But what the eval does is it says, as long as whatever's in the text, whatever's in the text in this inner HTML doesn't have quotes, it will actually evaluate it as a number. So the eval function is basically saying, take whatever is in a string, pretend it's not a string, run the JavaScript, and then return that result.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Max, eval covers addition, multiplication, division, anything else?
It
mean,
runs
subtraction, like-
anything as if it were JavaScript itself. So theoretically, we could do something like const example equals, or let's say add equals num1 and num2. Don't follow along with me here, just an example. And we return num1 plus num2. What we could actually do is console log an eval that is calling the add function with 2 numbers inside of it.
Just out of curiosity, did we learn it this way? I don't remember this. I remember the way you just did it, num1 plus num2. Is eval new, or we just didn't do it, or I'm just not remembering?
Eval's been around for a while. I only taught a week of JavaScript though in your
Right.
cohort. So it's entirely possible that we didn't even do this project. Or if we did, we may have done it.
We didn't.
Give
we
you
did
more
this as
practice
part of
with the
CSS, but
functions.
and anyway, it doesn't matter.
So yeah, if you do the eval on that, you can see the 11 is coming out right here. This is a good example of eval doesn't always have to be for math operators, and you want to be careful with eval because they also open up security risks. If you're letting the user type in any code, you can basically have the user run some code that you might not expect for them to have access to be able to run. So there are security risks with eval, but not in this situation because we're limiting the input. We're not letting them just type anything in and evaluating it as JavaScript. We're only letting them have access to those numbers.
Okay.
Sequoia, what's up?
So I'm getting like the little red arrow. Like, I don't understand. Like,
Yeah, share your screen.
I see these two screens are highlighted, but I'm not sure like what I did wrong.
Me request remote. Okay, so that is because all of this code is actually supposed to be in our equal pressed function. So if you think about it, these 3 steps that we're doing, we only want to do that when the equal button is pressed. We don't want to do that when any of the other buttons are clicked. And so because you had it inside of this curly brace, it was running every time you clicked a button. We only want it to run when the equal button itself is pressed.
Okay.
Palash, what's
Yeah.
up? Yeah, no problem.
Is there a reason you declared that screen variable inside the equal pressed function again, or is it just to explain to us?
Yeah, great question. We do have to declare this variable again because of something called scope, SCOPE, like the mouthwash. Whenever we declare a variable inside of a function, we don't have access to it outside of the function. So if I console log the screen right here, when I click on a number, I can see that div inside of my function. However, if we come outside of that function and put a console log down here and I refresh it, it's like it. Oh, that's interesting. That's not, I didn't know screen was a global variable. I learned something new today. Let me give you a better example there. It says screen2 is not defined. Well, what do you mean screen2 isn't defined? I defined it right here. Well, the variable has something called scope in it. Because we declared the variable here, we can't access that variable outside of the scope of this function. So what we could do is we could say, hey, take this screen and move it outside of the function, because we need access to the screen not only in button clicked, we also need access to it in equal pressed. Because we moved the screen outside of this button clicked function, we now can use it in both locations. So we don't have to do this step anymore. So this code will actually work. But if I left screen inside the scope of the button clicked function, I would not be able to access that screen outside of it.
Got it. So I remember there was this whole article in the JS beginner course that we were at, that was the prerequisite of CIC.
Yep.
And it went on and on about the scope. So like, but I didn't get it. Like, what is the best practice here?
In a project this small, I don't think it matters too much. Best practice would be don't break dry, right? Because this is repeating ourselves. We're accessing the same thing twice. So best practice would be, because we're using it 2 times, to put it out in the outside code and then continue to reference that variable instead of having to go back to the HTML and pull it out every single time. So best practice would be to move it out of the scope of the function and make it in the global scope so both functions could access it. But I think for the sake of understanding this code, it makes it a little bit easier to do it twice. So I'm going to leave it as is, but it could definitely be argued for best practice sake that you should move it out and make it a global variable instead.
So could you show us where it would go?
Yep. Right up here. And then we would also have to take it out from down here so the two weren't conflicting. And then the code would work exactly the same.
And just to be clear, when you say outside of a function, you just mean outside of the brackets, correct?
Yes.
More.
So these curly braces or brackets are what are defining what is inside the function.
Does it matter if you declare it outside as well as inside by mistake?
That's a good question. I don't think it will error. It will prefer local scoped variables. So it will reference this screen instead of this screen up here. But that is definitely not best practice. You always want variable names to be unique, even if they are scoped differently. It is not generally a good idea to have variables be the same name.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you could call it something else within the function, right? You could define it differently and it would just use in the function, if I'm remembering
Yes.
correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you could call this screen 2.
I don't know
if
why you would do
wanted
it, but I
to.
kind of remember that.
Yep. All right. How are we feeling? Feeling like we're understanding the equal? Feeling like we're ready to wrap up this project, start a new one? All right, come back over here. And I'm going to say 6 divided by 0 equals infinity. Okay, divide by 0. That's infinity. That's not a problem. Let's say 0 divided by 0 divided by, well, but what happened to my 0? Click 0. My 0's there. I click my divide button and my 0 disappears.
Because you have that clear if the value is 0.
We do have that, don't we? We have an if statement right here that says if the number is 0, then just make this screen be whatever number gets clicked on. Well, we don't want that. So what we need to do is say if the screen is 0 and the number clicked does not equal, oh, that's not going to work. I actually have not solved for this error in my own version of the code. Okay, I'm going to show another example of that, and then I will think through how we can fix that error. let me do something different. Let's say we say 2 divided by equal. Well, you can't 2 divided by what? If you notice down in our JavaScript, it says unexpected error of end of input. What did they mean by end of input? We inputted 2 divided by and just ended the input there. And it's like, divided by what? I don't know how to do that. Well, ideally, we would show to the end user, hey, there's an error. You need to fix what you just put in there. So in order to do that, what we do is we use what is called a try-catch statement. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, try to go get the result and put it in the screen. And if we don't, if there is an error that happens, instead go to the screen and make the inner HTML say error. So I took the result line and the screen inner HTML line, and I put it inside my try. We try some code, and if it throws an error, we catch the error. Thank you. All right, let's see how this works. I say 8 divided by equal, and now I get this error. So there are times in our own code that the user may actually cause an error. And we don't want that to crash on them. We want to be able to handle that and tell the computer to do something else. So what it's going to do here is if I do some math operation that it knows how to do, if I say 8 divided by 2, and I get 4, this catch never runs. This is like an if-else statement, but specifically for errors. This is a way to say, try to do this code, and if it works, great, ignore the catch. But if there is an error that happens, we call that throwing an error, catch it, and then do this code in here down instead. Anyone need help with that? Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good. I say 8 divided by equals. I get my error, and I'm like, all right, I need to go retry that, right? So I click on 8, and now I've got an error 8. I'm like, that pesky screen not clearing itself. What I need to do is say, hey, I've already tackled this. I've already tackled this. If the screen has a 0 in it, take whatever number is clicked and overwrite it. Well, if the screen has 0 in it, or we use our double vertical bars, that is the button underneath your delete key towards the top right between delete and return, you are going to hit shift and hit that key twice to get 2 vertical bars. So we're going to say if the screen inner HTML is 0, or the screen's inner HTML is equal to the word error, then go ahead and clean out what is in the screen and use the next number clicked instead. So I come over to my browser, I refresh the page, I say 6 divided by equals, I get an error, I click on another number, and it cleans out my page, my error screen. So again, right, in our if statement, underneath the button clicked, we added in these 2 vertical bars. Those 2 vertical bars are to say or. Once we get that in, we say, okay, if the screen inner HTML is equal to 0, or the screen's inner HTML equals the word error in a string, that must mean that we want to take whatever the next number is pressed and clean out what is in the string.
Question.
Yes.
So that try catch error statement, like, does it cover every single error that can happen?
Yes. We can get details of what the error is by using this variable here called error. And so it depends what is getting thrown. So if we console.error this out, we can actually see that this is unexpected end of input. So we could actually, depending on what this error is, display a more specific error message and say, like, you know, entry not fully complete. And then if it were like 0 divided by something else, we could say error cannot divide by 0, or 0 is not divisible. So you can actually handle things differently in your catch statement, depending on what type of error it is. But if it is an error that JavaScript is throwing, then it will be caught by this catch. And then you can do if statements inside of that and all that kind of stuff. Danny, what's up?
So when I click my C, it goes into the calculator.
That is the next thing that you guys are
Okay.
going to be little birdies pushed out of the nest, and you're going to figure out how to do that on your own. But
Okay, I want to make sure to miss something.
you did not miss it. Anyone else have questions on this stuff before we move on to that next step? Okay, so let's think through that clear button, because if we type some numbers in here and click C, the letter C shows up. So we're going to think this through. Where did we handle the button behaving differently? We did that down here. So we are going to add an else if the individual button, inner HTML, is equal to the letter C, then add on click of clear button pressed function. Okay, well, if we are using this clear button pressed function, we also need to make the function. So I'm going to say number 1, number 2, number 3, make a new function called clear button pressed. And number 4, inside the function, get the screen and set it equal to 0. Right? Because when we clear out a screen, it doesn't actually make it empty. It sets it back to the initial state, which is the 0 when the page first loads. So you guys are going to do all 4 steps right now on your own. While you're panicking here, take a breath and realize we already have the syntax here. We already have the on-click syntax here. We have the equal press syntax up here. And we've got getting the screen and setting it equal to some string down here. So this is your moment. Take a breather, take about 15 minutes, and try and get 1 through 4 working on your own. Won't be only 4 lines of code, but it will be the most important parts will all be on 4 lines. okay to ask for help.
Hi, it's me. I need help.
Share screen. Okay, so what's happening in the browser?
Mm. Um, that it's not doing anything.
You have your console open?
Somewhere.
Not your terminal,
Or
your
no.
console in the browser.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says individual button is not defined. And it's even telling us down, the issue is right on line 49. So if we switch back to your code, let's take a look specifically at 49 and see what's going on there.
Okay.
Okay, so 49. This is probably on me. I changed my variable name to individual button here to make it more clear what we're looping through. And you did that in both places, but you didn't do it in the loop where we actually get each individual button. So if you change that button to individual button, see what happens in the browser.
Okay.
There you go. You're all caught up.
Okay. Oh, that's what we're doing. Okay.
All right, who needs help? Who's stuck? I'm actually gonna launch a poll to see where you guys are at. Amberlynn, what's up?
I broke my prettier at some point.
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look.
If I share it. Okay.
Okay. So what's going on?
Somewhere in here.
Yep. You ended up with, so we have to be careful on our syntax. Let me request remote.
Sure.
So just like we have our if statement up here, we use that exact same syntax down here. We say else if, and then the logic goes in the parentheses. So you were on the right track.
Okay.
Your internet's lagging a little bit. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
All right. Now we take
Right.
this individual button and we put it inside the if, and then we clean up some of these curly braces. And now, hopefully, your prettier is less mad at you. Else, oh, one more extra parenthesis. There we go.
Okay.
Did
Thank you.
prettier run, or is it still cranky?
Oh,
No,
the
it's-
last one.
If for all, yeah, I think that's just an extra one. Oh no, that's for the for loop.
I think there was, I saw one a little higher now in the second part of the question for number 3.
Oh, you are missing the closing one there.
Okay,
There we go. Now prettier's back
okay. Thank you.
on the right track, but good for other people to see that syntax.
Thank you.
Max.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm getting like confused with the second part.
Okay.
We're like at the hold up, wait, let me try one more thing. Hold up.
Look at how we add the equal pressed, and it's going to be very similar to how we add the clear button pressed. Taylor, sorry, I didn't see your hand raised there.
All right. Hi.
Don't be
Just
afraid to
trying
come
to-
off mute and slap me around if you've got your hand raised and I'm like completely ignoring you.
No, it's all right. I was staring at my code trying to see if I could figure it out before you noticed. All right. So let's tap 2.
Okay, so we have what we need to do is make it an else if, because we want to chain those 3 things together. So instead of the if keyword, we're actually going to say else if on 58. Yep.
Oh, okay. Forgot about that one.
Mm,
And then you
Else if.
also have an extra curly brace. So the curly
I
brace on
thought so.
61 is actually going to close out the one on 58. So if you take either the beginning one out on 61 or the one on 60, it should fix your problem for you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome.
And now Prettier is going to run, and now it's a little bit easier to see where the openings are going. The closing one for 57 is actually down on 59.
Oh, okay, I see it. Okay. I'm having trouble getting used to following those still.
Yep. So this one here is actually closed out. Oh, sorry.
That's my fault.
This one here is closed out by this one here. And then
Right,
this
okay.
one here actually closes out right down there. You got it.
Right.
eh,
Okay. And then so it's letting me type in numbers now, but it's just not clearing, but it's saying clear button pressed in the console.
Okay, so you have step 3 done, which is make a new
Yes.
function called clear button pressed.
And
Number
then
4, inside the function, get the screen and set it equal to 0.
okay, let me see if I can get that working, and I'll see if I can get my hand raised again.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to copy and paste the steps into the chat just in case it's easier to reference them in there. Jen, what's up? Oh,
I got everything except for getting it to go back to 0.
okay. Share your screen and see what you got. Okay, so you got your clear button pressed. So scroll up. Let me see that function. Your clear button press, you get element by ID screen. So you did the get the screen part. Now, how would you set it to 0? How did we set the screen to show the word error?
Up here.
Not there. That's where we check to see if the word error is in the screen. Where do we set the screen to the word actually to error?
Right here.
Yep. So we would use that same exact syntax, except instead of setting it to error, we're going to set it to 0 instead.
So this whole thing.
Just that line, screen inner HTML is equal to 0.
And that goes in with the
Clear button
number
press
4. Goes in that whole thing.
in right after 37. And this is where people start frantically taking screenshots of your code because you get it working.
Still not working.
Interesting. Okay, let me see. I think your else if might be off, but let's find out. So down here,
So you put the else if before the else, right?
check right here. You're checking to see if the screen's inner HTML only has the letter C in it. We don't want to check to see if the screen's inner HTML has a C in it. We want to check to see if the button's inner HTML has a C in it. So now we say 9 plus whatever, and now it goes to error.
Goes
Why?
to error after you clear it.
Yep. We
Oh, that's-
do 3 plus 9 clear.
Oh, I don't want it to go to error. I want it to go to 0 though. So I got to go back up to that screen inner HTML equals 0.
Beautiful. Got it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good work. Palash, what's up?
For example, I want to share it in the chat. Can we, in the else if statement, replace the entire, just add this entire line?
You absolutely can.
So appending this dot inner HTML at the end of this document dot get element by ID, will that work?
It will. That is called chaining in JavaScript, and it is totally valid. And that's the way you would see like a professional developer write it. They would condense all of that down into one line. So it's a little bit more confusing, but it's also more succinct. So you could do it either way, and that's totally fine.
Thank you.
Sequota.
Can I share my screen? My else is coming up like error.
Sure.
No.
So you can't have a else if you have an else if after it. So if you take your 57 through 60 and put it, or take that and move it up, either way, the else has to be the last thing in your if statement. Yep. And you have a semicolon on line 58 that you should not have. The semicolon is like, hey, this is the end of the line, and that's what was confusing it. So if you save that, that should work if your screen is no, you want your screen.innerHTML equals 0. You want that to happen inside of your clear button pressed. So did you make a clear button pressed? That's step number 3.
Is that the cons?
Yep.
Okay. No, because I wasn't sure where to put that.
You're going to put that the same place that we put equal pressed or button clicked.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. You're on the right track. You got 1 and 2 done. Now it's time for number 3. Kenny, what's up?
Yeah, I think I got everything to work except like the clear. I don't
Okay.
know.
Share your screen.
Yeah, let me see. You see?
Yep.
So this is my step 1 and 2 over here.
Okay. That's good. Let me see your number 3.
3 and 4 is over here.
Okay, so the problem is if you open the console in your browser, does it give you an error that says screen is not defined?
No, it gives me a different error. I can share that too.
Sure.
Say 5 plus 2. I gotta be started. Yeah, like 5 plus 5. Cool. But it doesn't really do anything when I click the clear. But I noticed that there's something right here in my event. I don't know why that's there.
Okay. Take me back to your code and let's take a look. All right, so let me request remote. So in your if statement down here, you are checking the inner HTML of the button. If it's a C, then you're doing your clear button pressed, and your clear button pressed is coming in here, and it doesn't know what the screen is, because when we define the screen up here, we tell it, hey, go get the element by ID screen. So we also need that down in here to say, hey, go back into the HTML, go get the screen out, then set the inner HTML to 0. So you don't have to switch to screen share, but test that and see if that works.
Yeah, that worked.
Cool.
Thanks.
That would have normally have thrown an error for you. The thing is that screen is, I learned this today, I didn't know this, of like a different, like a global built-in variable. And so normally JavaScript would throw an error and it would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, what screen, because it was defined in another function. But if you put it in the right scope, that's what fixes the problem for you.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, good work. Rain, what's up?
Can you hear me this time?
I can.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm kind of parking lot, putting my questions in parking lot because yesterday I did have the day off. But I was changing my else if and else, like you just said. And now when I go live, I can't press any button on my calculator.
You
Like,
have your console open?
hold on 1 second. And that would be on the web page, right?
Yep, right click inspect and then go to the console tab.
Mhm. Inspect and bam, that is open.
Do you see any red in there?
I see a red X with the number 1, and then on my visual code, I had a prettier issue, but it's no
Okay.
longer going.
So JavaScript is very fickle. If everything's working until you get one syntax error, and then all of your JavaScript refuses to run no matter where that error is. So the error in the console in the browser is probably going to tell you roughly where the syntax issue is if you can't find it in your JavaScript.
So it's definitely JavaScript, because on the console, it's saying that there is a syntax error with an unexpected token.
Yep.
Yeah, so is it okay if I mute and share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, what is wrong?
Okay, so before we switch back over to your code, look at the browser here, and it's not only telling us unexpected token, it's also telling us that 57 is the line number that the problem is, where the problem is. So if you take me back over to your code, we can take a look, and it's saying, let me request remote.
And go figure, it's where I was moving the else statements.
Yep. So right
yeah.
here, it's saying if the inner HTML is equal to the equal key, else if what? Else, if we can say else go do this thing, but it needs the else if what is going to happen. What is weird though? Oh, okay, yeah. So you need to say else if the individual button dot inner HTML is equal to the letter C. Then what do I want to do? Else, then it's probably some other button, so add on that button clicked. So this is this line right here is the number 1. Else if the individual button's inner HTML is equal to the letter C. That is what we did in this step here. So now you need to move on to number 2.
All right, maybe I should have finished out my else statements and stuff before I raised my hand, but thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Palosh, what's up?
Can I show you my screen? It's not working.
Sure.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so when I add it as a function and call the function out here, it does work. But when I do this in the else if, it doesn't.
Okay, so watch, this is a good example. Watch what you're doing, because what we are saying in this for loop is run this for loop when the page first loads. So this page is first loading, it's seeing that the button is C, it's setting the screen's inner HTML to 0, and then this code never runs again. So what you still need this on click here, because this on click is what's actually attaching it to the event, so that when the event happens, it needs to go run a function.
Okay,
So we can't say the on click is equal to this specific line of code. We actually have to make that on click equal a function that will go run when the event happens. So what we could do, if you give me remote, I can show you how we would fix that. We can actually do this as an inline if statement. I'm sorry, as an inline function. So we could say when the individual button is clicked, set the screen's inner HTML to 0. So we just made it an inline function instead of referencing the clear button pressed function up here. So if we do this and hit clear, it should work. So we can't just attach a line of code to an on click. It has to be a function in order for the event to know what to go run.
understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Sequoia, what's up?
Let me share my screen. So two things. I'm not I'm not sure that I did the excuse me, the fonts right. I'm not sure if I did that right, and I'm not sure, like, does it have to go in a certain spot?
Yes. So we want to move that clear button pressed out to be the same scope of the other functions that we've made. So you see how the equal pressed and the button clicked are like all the way out, they're indented all the way to the left. We want to make that clear button pressed out at that same level or scope. So we're going to move that out to down here. So now that's outside of our for loop. And so we can access it in here. Now everything looks right here. So go ahead and test that in your browser and see what happens.
So when I do like 8 + 8 and then I hit like the C, nothing happens.
Okay, let me take a look at. Oh, button. Okay, so when we add our on click, we don't add the on click to the inner HTML. We just add it to the button itself. So give that a try.
Okay.
Cool.
Got it.
Nice work. Good job. Last call for help on this.
Yeah, I had my hand raised for a minute.
Did you really? Did I not?
Yeah,
It didn't come through on Zoom. Sorry.
That's all right. No big deal. It's all right. I did something and I messed up my equal button. And now I know I'm not finished, but it says clear button press, but not my equal button. This does not work at all. So
So
I just want to share my screen.
yeah, go for it. Once you break any of your syntax in any of your JavaScript, all the functionality breaks. So it's kind of like HTML when you forget that one closing div tag and like the rest of your site breaks underneath it. The same kind of goes for your JavaScript. So you've got your else if, you've got your clear button pressed. That looks good. Do you have your clear button pressed function?
So I know it's not still not functional, but I know I'm on the right track. I just don't know what exactly I'm missing specifically.
You're definitely on the right track. Let me see what's going on in your browser because I don't have any syntax errors. I don't see any syntax errors. And
I know I share a different screen. Hold on.
oh, you know what? Before you do, just scroll down in your script a little bit. I just want to make sure you're on click, equal press. Yeah, all of that
Yeah.
looks fine. So let's, if you stop your screen share and restart it, you can start it on your other monitor.
All right. All right. So yeah, so I'll refresh my browser.
Yep. And if you
Um,
just do like 3 + 1 equals.
Yeah, so and then it just says button clicked, and that's it. Like it doesn't.
Okay.
What I don't know what happened. Like I don't know what I did.
Switch me back to your code. Let's take a
Alright.
look. I didn't see anything on first glance, but now that I know what's going on in the browser.
All right, so yeah, this is where I had my, and I'm like, I checked all my spelling and my syntax, so I know my spelling's correctly, like as far as like my casing and everything. I just don't know exactly where I messed up at.
Neither do I, but we will
Right,
figure it
right
out.
there. The console.log clear button pressed, he's got clear pressed. Does that make a difference? Up. Right there at the top, 942.
Oh yeah, that's the clear button, but the equal button is the one that's broken.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you got your equal press, you get the screen, you try the eval, screen inner HTML. This should say inner HTML, but I don't think that's the. I don't think that would cause the problem. Eval. Result, inner HTML, screen, get element by ID, screen. I mean, just try that in your browser. You don't have to switch the screen share over. Does that still cause an issue?
C3. Hold on. 3 + 1. Yeah, it says it's just saying it's pressing the equal buttons, but there's no result coming up.
So for individual button of all buttons, aha. HTML.
Oh wow, man! All right, let me see.
You really like your hypertext markup language.
Yeah, there you go. All right, okay, we're cool now.
Cool.
I'm so upset about that.
And definitely call me out because like everyone else's hand raised went through and Zoom just like crapped the bed and didn't show your hand as raised. So definitely come off mute and be like, Max.
Yeah, I thought I hit it twice. I said maybe I didn't hit it where I thought I hit it or something, but it's cool. It's cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Goggin, what's up?
And sorry, I'm sick today, so I don't feel good.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I'm trying to work with you guys still, but I can't. I think my code is messed up a little bit. So
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look.
I don't know what the hell is showing in the cons.
So pop open your browser in the console just so we can see if there are any errors coming in there, because that might tell us exactly where the problem is. Okay, so try and add a couple things in the calculator. Let's see what's going on.
What the hell is happening here? All right. So this one works, but I don't know what the hell this is.
Okay, so line 29, it's saying the problem is. So,
Oh, maybe this.
nope, we don't have result. What is result equal to?
Mm,
Oh, so you've got it duplicated. So all the work that should be doing is happening in here. It's actually getting the result and setting that into the screen. So this is a line of code that you've got down here, but it's just out of order. So if I take this out and then try it, you're back in business.
okay, and does the clear works?
Nope.
That's what I thought it was because of that.
So you need to add to your else if down here and link it to the clear button pressed up here. You also are just doing number 3 here. You're getting the screen, but you're not doing number 4, which is setting it equal to 0.
Okay. Like, so how is it gonna be like? Man, my head is hurting. I thought I did it here.
You did it on button clicked, but we don't do it in. You're doing it in button clicked. We want to do it down in the for loop down here.
Okay, so just move that here.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Amberlynn, what's up?
I think I am stumped.
Okay. Share your screen.
Thank you. That is. Oh, you can see it. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so you did number 3, which is make the new function called clear button pressed. Now we have to do number 4, which you're kind of on the right track, but it says inside the function. So we have to do that inside the function. We have to get the screen. You're gonna, come on. So we get the element by ID screen. And now that we have access to the screen, we set the screen's inner HTML to 0. But when we use triple equals, what we're saying is whatever's in the screen's HTML equal to 0. Well, no, it's 0.88888888. What we want to do is say, no, the 0 is now what should be inside the screen's inner HTML. So this is really a trick because it says for inside the function, get the screen and set it equal to 0, but that's really 4 and 5, right? Because we have to get the screen first and then we can set it to 0. So now that it's doing that, if we type something in and hit clear.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. You were close. You were very close.
My brain was melted.
All right. How are we feeling? Last call for help on this.
Mine is still not working.
Okay. Check your clear button pressed to make sure that your clear button pressed has inner HTML equal to 0.
So to the all buttons, right? Do I have to put that screen dot inner HTML equal to 0 there too?
In the clear button pressed function, yes.
I did in the function.
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a quick look.
Right.
Okay, and then where's your if statement? Okay, so you are setting the screen's inner HTML to clear button pressed. Do we want the screen's inner HTML to equal a function?
Trying to process it. I don't know. The
So
bottom.
what you've got in your code is you're saying, hey, the screen's inner HTML is now going to equal this code of this clear button pressed. So when you click on the clear button, it's like, what the heck is this function? We don't want to make the screen's inner HTML equal the clear button press. We want to say when the button is clicked on.
Fuck that. All right.
Now, if we get something typed in and click on clear, we check we don't care about what's in the screen. We care about what's in the button.
Button HTML equals C. Okay. Oh,
Now you're working.
Thank you. I'll have to rewatch this video. Today's video is my so I'm trying to recover this.
Amberlyn, did you have another question or did I forget to lower your hand? Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. One last, let's go through this. If you guys cannot do this step on your own, this is your moment to say, I need to step it up. I need to rewatch the video. I need to do this because it does not get any easier from here. Good work, Mo. I'm glad you got it working. This is your make it or break it moment in JavaScript. If you don't understand this JavaScript, you are going to be lost for the next 3 weeks of JavaScript. So this is your moment to say, hey, this is a couple different concepts. We're doing functions, we're doing events, we're in the for loop, we're doing an if statement. There's a lot going on here, but I don't expect you guys to be able to do this project from scratch without any help. I do expect you to be able to do little pieces of it. And it's one thing to be able to read a language. It's one thing to be able to hear someone else speaking a language. But what really matters is can you speak the language, right? It's one thing to be able to understand someone else. That's you following along with me. It's another to be able to hold a conversation. This is how we hold conversations as developers with the computer, right? It's one thing for me to sit here. I already know how to write this code. It's up to you guys to say, all right, can I take on a little challenge here? Can I do this on my own? So what we do is we come down to number 1 and we say, all right, before we even write a line of code, what's going on here? This for loop is running over each one of the buttons on the screen. What does that mean? That means that we go over each one of these buttons. What do we do with each one of these buttons? We check to see if the button we're currently on is the equal button. If it is the equal button, then attach this equal pressed so that the JavaScript knows when that button is clicked on, it should be doing this thing. Otherwise, if it's any other button, we want it to do the on click down here of the other button pressed. Well, now we want to add to this. So we say else if, and then it needs to know what, else if what, else if the individual button that we're looping over, the inner HTML of it is equal to the letter C. Then we come inside our curly braces. What else do we want to do if the button we're looping over is the clear button? We want that button to have an on click of clear button pressed. Okay, that is number 2. Now, number 3, make a new function called clear button pressed. So we use our arrow syntax, our curly braces. We have our clear button pressed function now made. All right, now number 4, we have to do inside the function, inside these curly braces, so the JavaScript knows that's the code that should be running when the button is clicked. And we say, get the screen And once we have the screen, which is the first part, we set the inner HTML of the screen equal to 0. I come back over here, I click on a bunch of things, I hit the clear button, and we go back to 0.
Question, Max, when do you use that equal and greater than sign?
If you're
And
doing
don't
it in an if statement,
Okay. Thanks.
you use the greater than or equal or the triple equal when you're doing comparisons. You use the single equal when you're doing assignment. Take whatever's on the right and put it in what's in, assign it to what's in the left.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, we are at break time. Take a moment. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, have some water, reset your brain, because we are rolling
Whiskey shot.
right on in to the next project. You guys don't get that much of a break, but it is more important that you understand this code more than anything. So if you feel like you are struggling, go fill up my calendar. Unfortunately, I'm not available this weekend, but there are times still for tomorrow. There are times for next week as well. Don't panic and go, oh my God, I can't book something with Max until Monday or Tuesday. We're going to go through all of these concepts again. We're going to do them in a weather app, and it's completely different context, but all of these same concepts we're going to do again with a loop, with a drop down, with an on change event. All of that is coming back. We are getting more practice with it, but ask yourself, can I understand this language if someone is speaking it to me, versus can I speak and hold a conversation on my own? If you did steps 1 through 4 on your own, you are doing great. Pat yourself on the back, get ready for the next project. If you can't, realize, hey, this is the time to go back in, practice a little bit more, because by the end of class on Thursday, I'm going to ask you guys to do something similar. I'm going to give you a couple steps written out, very explicit, and that is going to be your homework. And we'll spend the last couple minutes of class on Thursday to make sure you guys have time to work on that and ask questions. But that's coming around the pipeline. So make sure, have that check-in with yourself and say, if I did this on my own, all right, I'm getting this. I can do this. If you can't, now's your moment to realize that you just got pushed out of the nest, and it's up to you to learn how to fly. With one-on-ones and additional support and all the resources and all of that. Not saying you're on your own if you can't do this. Just saying that put in the time. Go on break, be back at 7:30. And I'll stick around for a minute in case anyone has questions.
Oh, quick question. Go ahead. Quick question. Are you going to show us how to clear it after a sum if you want to add something else? Or is that for
You would
another
just
day?
hit, after you hit equal, you'd have to hit the clear button, and then you could type in additional things.
Okay, but if you didn't clear, like on most calculators, if you did like 10 times 2 equals 20, and then you added a number, the 20 would go away and now you'd be starting a new activity. But that could be beyond what we're doing. We were just talking about it. trying to
Yeah,
figure it
so
out.
what you would do is you would say let last button equal last pressed equals false. And then you would say equal pressed, after you show the result, set equal last pressed to true. Then when the next button is clicked, if the equal last pressed button is true, then set the, and I have to move this down a little bit to down here, then set the screen's inner HTML back equal to 0.
Thank you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That was really Jillian. I'm in Albany today, so we're watching each, we're both over here.
I believe that will work. 9 times 9 equals 81, and then we type in like 6 and it clears
Yep.
out and has a 6.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
I know that was really quick, so if you have questions on that, that's totally fine, but this is what we call a flag. Flags are usually Booleans, either true or false, but it's a way that we can keep track of information under the hood of whether or not the user did something. And so we do a let because that true and false change value, and we basically keep track of that equal event. We set it to true, and then when the next event comes in, we're able to use that flag to figure out what just happened.
Thank you.
That was a good question.
It was actually Jill's question. She's the ringer. If we're ever going to have a competition, bet on her.
Yeah, there's also the problem of like, if I type in 0 and divided by, the 0 doesn't hold. We
Yeah.
could solve that a similar way with the flag of saying like, if this is the first key pressed, then don't clear out the screen. But I'm just gonna leave that one out there.
And if I were, so I would just search flags on and get kind of an instruction in W3, that would be the thing to search.
It would just be under variables or Boolean variables.
Boolean.
But that concept is there's not really documentation on it. That's when we start thinking like an engineer and start saying, well, here are the tools in my toolbox, so how would I solve that? And so the way I think about it is breaking it down into like, okay, what do we want to happen when the equal button is pressed? If another button is pressed after it, we want that to clear out. And so I think about it as, okay, if the equal button is pressed, we want to know that was the last button that got pressed. So we have to set that to true. But the problem is we need access to that when the next button is pressed as well. So we can't just keep track of equal button last pressed in here. We have to declare it out in the global scope, so we have access to it both in both the button clicked and the equal button clicked. So that's a scoping variable thing of, because we need it in both functions, we make it outside of the functions, we update it in the equal button, and then inside the next button clicked, we use that if statement to keep track of that.
Yeah.
So there's no like one piece of documentation that I can point you at there, but it's basically variable scoping, if statement, and then just thinking through engineering wise exactly how you ask the question, right? If I press a number after I hit the equal button, it should just clear out. Okay, well, we need to keep track of that equal was the last thing pressed. We need to modify the behavior when the next button is pressed, and we need to be able to keep track of that across both functions, so that becomes a global variable.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my problem, was I kept trying to move the variables. I was trying to move the variables around into different functions because they're all labeled in different functions to define different functions. So I was getting very confused. So thank you. That's much simpler.
Always love getting put on the spot. It's always a good thrill of like, ooh, that's a good question. I don't know.
You can always count on me, Max. You can always count on me. I might be crying, I might be laughing, I might be asking a weird question, but I'm always here for you.
Awesome. Well, enjoy your break. I'll see you guys at 7:30. All right. So we are officially done with the calculator. Before we move on, is there any piece of code that you reviewed during the break that you would like me to go over one final time before we move on to our next project? Okie doke. We are going to move on to the weather app. So I am going to close out of my day 2 folder. I'm going to head to my code folder on the desktop. I am going all the way back to week 2 week 2, day 4. And I'm going to pop open my index.html and remember what we did all those many weeks ago in our weather app. Once I have that, I'm going to select the week 2, day 4 folder and hit Command C to copy it. Once I have that Command C, I'm going to go back to my week 7 folder, and I'm going to go ahead and paste in the week 2, day 4 folder. I am then going to rename my day 4 folder as day 3, and I'm going to pop that open in our VS Code. So essentially, we're taking our week 2, day 4 folder, copying it, going to week 7, pasting it, and renaming it to day 3. I will start a live share with you guys and put it in the chat. And when I hit my go live button, we should see the weather app as we left it off. If you do not have a copy of the weather app from week 2, day 4, you can copy and paste it from the live share that I just started if you want to slingshot yourself to where you are at. Yes, Shay, week 2, day 4. If you guys are mostly in, give you one more second, and then we will dive on in. Okay, so what we are going to add is, hey, this weather is great for my current location. But what I would like to do is to be able to click on a drop down here and switch that drop down to another location. And when I change that location, I want the weather information to update over here. So what we are going to do is we're going to go find where in our HTML we have the location. It says Manlius, New York 13104. I'm going to go ahead and take that out, and instead I'm going to put in a select. A select is just a drop-down menu, right? And in that drop-down menu, I'm going to put in an option. And one of the options is going to be Manlius. One of them is going to be Syracuse. And let's do 1/3 one, just so we've got some things to play around with. Let's pick San Francisco. So I save that. I come back over. You guys can do any locations, 2 or 3 of them. Doesn't really matter. It's up to you. I come over here and it says Manlius and it's selected. And I can come in here and pick another location and have it update that for me. Okay, that's great. Now I want to say, hey, when I pick one of these locations, I want the weather information to update here. But we run into a problem of, well, what's the weather? We kind of need to structure that data so we know, hey, what data is updating here? So we are going to create a new file, and we're going to call it script.js. We're going to put a console.log test in here. I will anchor that to the bottom of the screen. Then we are going to go down to the very end of our code right before that closing body. And we're going to put in our script src equals script.js. And remember, we can't use a closing tag here, a self-closing tag. We have to close the tag out ourselves. So I save, I come back over, I pop open into my console, and I make sure I have a test. So two things we've done. We took out our location and replaced it with this select in here. Number two, we created our file called script.js. Number three, we put our console.log test in there. Number four, we added in our script src tag. And finally, we made sure that test is showing up in the console. You guys, a minute to catch up on all of that.
Are we going to do a live share with this?
I did post a live share link in the chat at 7:32.
Thank you.
As long as we see our test in the console, we are good to go.
Hey, Max,
Yes.
test is not, the word test is not appearing for me.
Do you check your script tag? Make
Yes.
sure you got all of that right.
Script src script.js. Yep.
And have you saved your script.js file?
I have, yes.
Okay, share screen.
All right, see my screen?
Okay, so you have make sure you're looking at your URL. You have week 2, day 4 open in your browser. So go ahead and close out this tab here and then hit the go live button.
Gotcha. Sorry.
No problem. Anyone else need help or one more minute?
Well,
Socorro, is that you?
yep.
You need help?
Yes, I don't have test in mine as well.
Okay, share screen, take a look.
One second.
Okay, so you got your console log in there. Let me see your index.html. I'm sorry, before you switch that, your code, let me look at your code, your index.html code. And scroll down to the bottom. Okay, you're missing your script tag that I added on line 71 of my code.
Okay.
I'm going to stop your screen share because I'm pretty sure that will fix it for you. Jen, it's your safe place for now, but I ruin all safe places in all manners of all code. All right. So let's think about what we want to happen here. We want to say, hey, when you come in here and change the dropdown, I want something to happen in my JavaScript. I want to take the data, the weather data, and update it on the page. Okay, well, in order for us to update the data, we kind of have to think about structuring our data. And oftentimes we have real live information that we need to figure out how to structure the data ourselves. Sometimes we aren't just given the object or the array, we have to build it sometimes on our own. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to make a new variable called weather data. And I'm like, huh, now what? We have to keep track of the information here, but I want to keep track of the weather, the temperature, the cloudy, the precipitation chance, all of that for each one of these locations. What two data types would we consider to use to keep track of this weather information across 3 different locations?
Strings and numbers.
We have strings and numbers. We have to keep track of those strings and numbers, but because we need to keep track of multiple ones, what data type should we use? We wouldn't use a for loop. We would use a for loop to go over each one of them.
That would be an array, right?
An array would be the answer that you would think it would be, because an array, when we're in here, we could say, hey, in this array, we want to keep track of the temperature, and we want to keep track of the chance of humidity and the fact that it's 10 miles per hour. But we're like, all right, but we don't know what 48 is. Is 48 the temperature? Is 48 the chance of precipitation? Or is it the humidity percentage? So we run into an issue where we go, all right, maybe we should use an object. Because if we use an object, we can label it as temperature 48 and precipitation. There's no way I spelled that right. Is 55%, and the wind is 10 mph. Kenny, yes, an object is exactly a dictionary. In fact, in Python, this data structure is called a dictionary because we've got key value pairs, right? The key is like the word you're looking up in the dictionary. That's the temperature, the wind, all of that. And then the value is what we store inside of it. But we run into one more problem. We've got multiple different cities. This is the temperature for Manlius, but when I change that temperature here, or when I change that location, I want the temperature to update as well. So the actual solution for this is we use an object with objects inside of it. What we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, the temperature in Manlius is 48 with a precipitation and wind speed going on. We can then come down and say, hey, the weather in Syracuse is going to be slightly colder with a higher chance of precipitation and a wind of 20 mph.
Max,
Yes.
within the object, for the temperature and the precipitation, should we not put that into quotation marks? And if not, can you explain to me why?
Yes, we shouldn't, because if we wanted to, for some reason, add together the temperature and the precipitation, we couldn't do it if it was in a string. If we did that in a string, it would concatenate together and be 4855 is what would show up. Instead, we want to use the number data type, which is the value without temperature. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Would help if I couldn't even pronounce the names. Sorry, I totally got distracted there. if we use a number data type, the numbers will actually work so that we can add them together and do math operations on them. However, we can't put letters in numbers. And so that's why we have to put the wind in quotes here, because we actually have the MPH showing up. So the string, the quote here is saying this is a string of letters, right? This is a group of letters coming together that you don't need to evaluate. JavaScript, I'm not trying to tell you this is the variable name or anything like that. I'm just saying, hey, store these letters in this thing called wind. Compared to here, when we've got the 48, we're saying store the number 48 into the temperature.
Thank you.
Now we're going to do one more example here, and I'm going to say San Francisco has a temperature of 72 and precipitation 2% and a wind speed of 3 mph. And you notice my prettier is now screaming bloody murder. It is now mad about something, and it's got San Francisco underlined. And I'm like, what do you got against Francisco? Come on. When we create objects with a name, we cannot have a space in that. Well, we can have a space in them if we put it in quotes. And so quotes are always optional around object keys, but if they have a space in them, it's not that we're not allowed to use the space, it's just that we have to put it in quotes. Now, you may say,
too, right?
What's that?
You could use an underscore too as well, right?
You could use an underscore, yes. Now, you'll notice that in here, if we put this in quotes, Prettier is not mad at us, but as soon as I save it, Prettier is like, you stop that. And it takes out the quotes for us. So you can use an underscore, but oftentimes we're working with data that has spaces in the name. And so spaces aren't considered a bad thing in an object key. It's just something that you want to keep in mind. When do we need quotes around a key? If the key has a space in it, then we do need to put those quotes in. Otherwise, it is preferred to not put the quotes in. Okay, so we've got our data structured. We then use this and we play around with it to make sure we can get out the data that we want. And this is where your homework from last week comes in, where you had to loop through all the different things. We aren't getting into a loop yet, but we want to make sure that we can get out any piece of information here. So what we do is we say console.log our weather data. And every time we put a dot in, we're going a level of inception deeper into this data. So we say weather data dot Syracuse. Okay, now what does that look like in our console? If we come over here and look, the only piece of information that we're getting are the 3 pieces of information related to Syracuse's weather. And if we come over here and we say dot Syracuse dot wind, we are able to get access to that 20 miles an hour. Now, if we tried to do that with our weather data dot San Francisco, we get that same issue, right? It's underlined. Well, what we have to do instead, because that has a space in it, we have to use our bracket notation instead. So we say weather San Francisco dot, and then let's grab the temperature out from it. And this should say weather data, my bad. And now we get 72 coming out. Take a moment, make sure you understand that.
if you use the underscores, you still have to put it in the brackets.
Oh, I actually don't know that answer. If you camel case it, you wouldn't have to put it in brackets. If you underscore it, that still works. Okay. So we've got our data structured. We've got a good starting point for all of this. Let's get back to what our goal is here. So we're saying, hey, when this dropdown changes to another value, I want to use the information in this object to update the information on the page. Well, we know that we've seen the on-click events that we could put on a button. We can do that same thing, except in our JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to my select tag, and I'm going to put an ID on that of location. Then in my JavaScript, I'm going to comment out these two console logs because that was just practice, right? We don't need it, but we might need to reference it down the road. Let's leave that in there. I'm going to say document.getElement by ID. And I am going to get the location ID that I just put on my select. And now that I've got that in my select, I am going to say, add an event listener. And the event listener that I want to add is for the change. Now, I would like to create a function to console.log out location changed anytime the location changes. We have now seen 3 separate ways we can attach an event listener in JavaScript. We can put it on the on-click or the on-change directly in the HTML. We can use the add event listener, or we can say .onClick or on whatever event equals a function. 3 different ways of doing it. Just depends on your coding style, but it doesn't really matter which one you use. Just showing you different ways of doing it in case you saw that in the real world, reading someone else's code, you'd understand that's all accomplishing the same thing. Okay. So I come over to my browser, I click on my dropdown, I change it to Syracuse, and I get location changed. But I want to know, what did the location change to? I need to know what city they selected in order for me to get the right information out of the object. So we could get the element by the ID and then get the value out of it. We did that before, that's fine. There are other ways of doing that. We can actually get access to the event right here. This event is going to have the details of what the target was and what the value of that target is. So I can come down here and add in a new console.log that logs out the event.target.value. So I save, I come back over here, I change it, and I get Syracuse, New York, and I change it one more time, and I get San Francisco.
Wait, Max, what's changing? I have the drop-down menu. Are the numbers supposed to change?
If you select a different value in the dropdown, you should see it log out what you selected in the console.
In the console, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
We're working our way up to numbers changing. Believe it or not, that's going to be 30 minutes.
What was the shortcut to console.log again?
I don't know of one.
Wasn't there like a
log, and then you select the second option.
I thought there was like a period enter or something.
There's a command / for making a new comment.
Okay, maybe I was
So
great.
it like up here, I highlighted both lines and hit command /, and that's what commented it out for me by putting in the double slash. But I don't know that there's a keyboard shortcut. If you if you type in log and hit down enter, it puts it in for you.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Max,
Yes.
so I'm looking at my code. Everything is similar to yours, except I have different cities. When I go to the console log on the web page, it does not change for me, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
Do you have the script source tag added to the bottom of your index.html right here?
I do have the script tag at that on that line.
Okay, share your screen.
Hold on 1 second. So that's my script tag right there.
Okay.
And this is what I've typed so far. I have New York instead of San Francisco, which doesn't make a big difference, but just to let you know.
Okay, so scroll over to the right a little bit so I can see the end of that line 12. Okay, so you need
I
to add
noticed
in the
this.
word event right here between the parentheses.
Ooh, forgot that. Sorry.
And
Yeah.
then did you add the ID of location onto your select in the index.html?
I more than likely did not. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good perception on noticing the I got your screen share. On noticing that that event was crossed out.
Thanks.
Anyone else need help? Okay. So we now have the location logging out of what got selected. So I'm going to store that, and I'm going to say const selected location equals my event target value. Now, what I would like to get out just in the console alone, I would like to get out the temperature of whatever city got selected. So I'm going to console.log out. I know I need my weather data because that's where it's coming from. How would I get the selected location from the dropdown to output the right information in my console? Anyone have a guess?
Wait, I didn't get the question.
I want the temperature of whatever city got selected in this dropdown to show up in my console.
Syracuse.
Well, what if I pick Manlius, or what if I pick San Francisco?
Oh,
Dot location.
Selected location.
Dot selected location. So let's just see what that does. I come over here, I pick a location, and it says undefined. Okay, well, what's going on here? In this console.log, I could put Syracuse and it would come out. What's happening is it's literally looking for something called selected location.
Quotes. You need quotes.
Okay, put this in quotes. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and boxes around it, I guess.
Okay, let's give that a try. Come over here, I pick a location, I get 93 out. Why am I getting 93? Because it's still looking at my selected location. This is a time we don't want the quotes. What the quotes are going to do is say, we're not looking for the word selected location. We actually want you to take the location that was selected, then retrieve it out from this object. So now when I come over here and I pick Syracuse, makes a little liar out of me. So we have to debug a step further. I'm going to console.log out my selected location again. I come over here, I pick a location, and it says Syracuse, New York, 13202. So I come over here and I go, huh, what problem am I having?
Do you not need the weather data to begin with?
I do need the weather data.
Do we have to name
You have to make it a
the
constant, right?
location, selected location?
The selected location is stored. It is a constant. Did we have any other ideas? Look at what's getting outputted compared to our data.
You're only going for the selected location, not the stuff inside of the.
Value, I think the value needs to be changed to the temperature.
No, because I'm not even getting into the temperature. I should be able to get all the information.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're just calling for the location, not the array in the location, right?
Not the keys inside the object for the location.
Okay.
But that's okay. We can get all three of them. That is valid. Does anyone else pay attention? What's coming out here compared to what do we have over here?
Undefined.
We've got undefined when we try and go for it, but what's in this selected location? What's
It looks
coming
like it's
out
pulling
is
from the
Syracuse,
HTML.
New York, 13202.
Yeah, you're storing the location, not the temperature.
We don't have Syracuse, New York, 13202. We only have Syracuse.
Gotcha.
So if we change this to Syracuse, New York, 13202, now when we select that in here, and I comment this back out, we get the data that we're looking for. But that's a really dirty solution because oftentimes we can't change the structure of the data once that data comes in from an API call. We have to work within the constraints of the data as it's provided to us. So instead, what we can do is in our interface, we can provide different values for these options. Think about the value as what the computer keeps track of it as compared to what's inside the option, which is the text that gets displayed to the end user. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a value here of manliness. We're going to add in a value here of Syracuse, and we're going to add a value in here of San Francisco. Now, when I come back over and select a location, I get that weather information coming out from my console. And if I select a different location, I get.
that's what I meant to say. The value is not defined on the JavaScript when it says, where is it? Right there, target dot value.
The value by default defaults to the value that is inside of the option if you don't set a value itself.
Oh, okay.
It would help if I spelled San Francisco right.
Random question.
Yes.
Is that why we use the value attribute in forms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the value of the select and the option is the same exact value that we would use on an input type text or anything like that. You can think of a select as just another, like a fancier type of an input. So now what's happening here? We are saying hey, in our JavaScript, go get the location. The location is tied to the select ID location here. We are saying add an event listener. Listen for an event. What's an event? The user interacts with something. What event are we listening for? We're listening to hear when the user changes that select. When that select is changed, it generates an event that is going to run the code between this curly brace and this curly brace down here. Okay, what happens when that event changes? We are going to log out location changed. Then we are going to go to the event, which is coming in from our event listener, go to the target, which is going to be our whole select thing out here, and go get the new value of the select. What is the value of the select? It's going to be Syracuse. Now take that value Syracuse and store it in a thing called selected location. Okay, now that we've got the selected location, we then take that selected location, and because it is in square brackets or braces and does not have the quotes, it knows don't look for the key, the actual letters selected location. Instead, go take Syracuse, look in weather data for Syracuse, and give me out all of this information right here. That is why in the console, we can see temperature 72, precipitation 2, wind 3, when we are, temperature 38, precipitation 90, wind 20, when we pick the correct value here. Take 2 minutes and make sure you understand that. Take 2 minutes, stay on mute, but talk that through yourself. Can you tell me what lines 12 through 17 are doing? We don't need quotes around selected location because we don't want it actually looking for the words selected location in the key. We want it to look for the value of selected location, which happens to be Syracuse. So when we want it to use the actual words, when we want it to look for console.log weather data San Francisco, we use the quotes. But if we wanted it to say, hey, I want you to go find the city Manlius. Now, if we console log out the weather data city, we are going to get Manlius's information showing up in the console. So it's basically saying, hey, if I want the actual letters, if I'm looking for the value of San Francisco in the object, I'm going to use quotes. But if I want it to use the value in a variable, I'm not going to put it in quotes. Those quotes are what we call the lack of quotes is what we call a dynamic key. It is using whatever is in this variable to figure out what key we're trying to get out of that object. Does that answer your question, Kenny?
Yeah, that makes sense now.
Cool. Jillian, what's up?
So I'm just trying to make sure I have the syntax right here.
Mhm.
So for the add event listener, so then you have the parenthesis and then change and then the event and the arrow function.
Yes.
that's all inside of that parenthesis at the end.
You got
So
it.
I just want to make sure I understand, if this all part of like the whole
This is-
function, this whole function is all part of the add event listener parameter
Yes,
or
it is.
argument? I'm a little confused there.
Yes, so parameters and arguments are used interchangeably. They aren't technically interchangeable, but it is a parameter when you define the function and then an argument when you use the data to send it into the parameters. So when we make a new function here called add, right? And we say num1, num2, you guys have to be sick of this example by now, but it's a good one. We log out num1 plus num2, and we do add, and we do two numbers in here. These are two different parameters, and the computer knows it's two different parameters because it's separated with the comma. And it's a parameter because we're defining the function. We're telling it, hey, when the add function gets called, these two parameters will be sent in. But when we call them here to send them into the parameters, they are called arguments. So when the function is called, they are arguments. When we define the function, they are called parameters. So this technically down here is an argument that we are sending into the parameter of the add event listener function.
Okay, so the add event listener is just a function unto itself.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And
Thank
that
you.
function has two arguments in this call, and it has two arguments because when it's defined, there are two parameters that it is expecting to have arguments sent into.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I will slip up, I will call it arguments, or I will call it parameters. Parameters is used a lot more than arguments, but technically they're arguments when you call the function, and they're parameters when you define the function, and you send the arguments into the parameters. But 99% of the time, I will just call them parameters.
Will it be a simpler way to pass the second argument, that is the event and the entire function?
You can move it into its own function and then pass the name of the function into the second argument.
Got it, like we did last time. Got it.
Yes. Yep, you got it.
So here we are like basically doing, we are selecting the element by ID, so the location. So we're selecting the location, and then we adding, so somebody is listening to the change next to it, and then every time it change, it sends the log out, like the console log.
Yep.
But then we also looking for the specific values, which is like the value that we have, like the temperature and everything.
Yep. The value is Manlius, Syracuse, or San Francisco.
Okay. I thought, I don't know why I'm getting confused here. I thought the value was the one we declared up there, the temperature and precipitation.
So here, think about it this way. Location is the location right here. The event happens on that location. The event, then we get into the target of the event, which is all of these options in here, and we get the value out from it. The value is coming out of one of these three values here.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Then we take that value and store it in selected location. And now we've got Manlius, Syracuse, or San Francisco. So what we do is we reference our object up here. So we're taking whatever the selected location is, and after we log it out, we're using that selected location to get one of these three pieces from the weather data.
Okay. But my thing is, like, see, we have the const weather data is not linked in any of this on the bottom.
We have the const what?
Let me see. I'm trying to. So the first, the cons, if you go up, where is it? See, there is a cons weather data.
Yep.
But we didn't link that to the document right here underneath there anywhere.
Doesn't matter. It's in the same file.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's global scope. So when we create it out here, if we don't put it inside of a function, you have you've got one but not the other. You can always access a globally scoped variable in a function, but if the variable is created inside the function, you cannot access that variable outside the function.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to do our one final part, and then we're going to call it a night. I'm going to go back up to my HTML, and I am going to find, I already have an ID on my temperature. It says 48. So I can come down here and say document, get element by ID, current temp, and set it equal to the weather data from the selected location. But I also, if I just save that right now, oh, I forgot, sorry, my inner HTML of the weather data at the selected location. I save that, I come over here, and I have object. This is one of the worst things that you can get in your JavaScript, because you're like, what do you mean object? Well, look at what's coming out of our log. It's logging out temperature, precipitation, and wind. How do we get just the right information to show up here? We need one more. We need to say temperature. Save, I come over, I change my temperature, and now I get 38, I get 72, and I get my 48. This is where we are leaving it for tonight. So take some time, go back through this, add in your comments, make sure you understand why is selected location not in quotes. What happens if we put it in quotes? Why do we need a dynamic key? How do we link that together? Push yourself a little bit to say, hey, can I add in another city here? Can I figure out how to add that option? What do I need to change in my JavaScript in order for that information to show up? This is just a tiny little taste of what we can do in our JavaScript, right? But we're opening the door here to understand that data is going to live in some kind of data structure, and we need a way to take that data and integrate it into our HTML. So this is only 20 lines of code, right? And even if we took out some of these console logs here, we would cut that way down. So take the next 10-ish minutes. If you feel like you're getting this, add some comments to your code and then get out of here, because we will be coming back to this project after you have Ryan's API module, and we will be continuing on from there.
So I had a little question out of this. So if we want to practice functions and stuff like this online, do you know any like kind of website that we can practice on like continuously? So
Free Code Camp has a bunch of different exercises. The Odin project is really good for practicing. And then there's also JavaScript 30, which is Wes Bose's course. That may be a little too involved right now for what you know how to do. But by the time you make it to the end of our JavaScript, you should have a much better handle on that.
I found it again on Code Academy too.
Mm-hmm.
They start with like the super basic. I put the link in Slack, but they start with like the super basic, and it kind of helps going through over and over and just repetitive and learning what everything is. And can you show me again what you did, the very last line of code, and what you did on the weather app to get it to run what you just did?
Yep. So we did a document get element by ID, current temp. I made sure that my current temp had the actual ID on it. Then I targeted the inner HTML of that temp. And then I say weather data, selected location, which is coming in from our event target value, and then grab the temperature out from that.
And then going over to the weather app, you did
Just
what?
change the drop down and the temperature should change here.
Oh, the temperature should change. Oh, it does change up in the little corner. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
You feel like you're getting this? You can GTFO. Otherwise, raise your hand and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might be stumbling on. This is something that you just need to hear over and over and over again until you get it. Just totally practice here. We've got another project coming down the pipeline as well. I believe tomorrow we start movie theater seats. It is a big, big project. You would like a taste of what we will be building over the next several days. Just put a link in the chat for you. Shay, what's up?
Whenever I changed my location for the big number temp, it comes up undefined.
Okay, share screen.
All right, just a second. Oh no. Activated music. You see it?
Okay, that looks fine. Let me see your JavaScript.
Oh wait, hold on. I'm on the wrong screen. Okay.
That looks fine. Oh, that looks good. So let me request remote. You've got temperature spelled right. Oh, come on. Got it spelled right here and wrong up here.
Every time I've been going over it, like literally the whole day today, all the errors I got was because I misspelled the word. And the last error I get of the day is because I misspelled the word. Thank you.
No problem. We'll confirm that that worked. I'm not always confident that
Temperature. Okay, so that's saved. Yep, it did.
Cool. That's all I've got for tonight. And head out if you think you got it. If you don't, raise your hand, ask the questions. I'm here.
Good question, Max.
Yeah.
Right, so I tried to write some of the steps that we just did in the script.js. Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have steps 1 and 2. So for 1, I just said, we're just testing out to make sure that JavaScript works and we see test on the console.
Yes.
And then for 2, we just gathered the data, including the cities and the temperatures, and we used objects within objects, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the other steps? Because I am a little lost.
Yeah, so I'll type them for you just so you've got an idea. And then if you want to go back and rewrite them, that's totally fine.
Okay.
So here we are just practicing accessing info through layers of the object, right? So the weather data is actually one big object here. Then when we do .Syracuse, we're narrowing in on just this object here. And then when we say .wind, we're going down and getting just that value in there. So that's just an example of using keys to kind of nest in. So this isn't really doing anything. It's just giving us practice of that dot notation. So I come down here and I say, okay, go get the location from the HTML up in our select here and add the event listener when something changes. So get the dropdown from the HTML and add a change event listener. That means everything in these curly braces is going to run whenever one of these options are selected or whenever the select gets changed. So now we log out location changed, but more importantly, get the value from the option of which one was selected and store it in a JS variable called selected location. So that is getting the value from here and storing it down in here.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then we do more practice with our console.log. And then this one's kind of the doozy of it all, right? We get the current temp div and set its inner HTML to go to weather data object, access the key based off of what location was selected. Can say value, right? And then we get the temperature value using the key. And then we take all of that and we set it to the current temperature.
Okay, and that's all for the comments.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, this one is doing a lot, but we basically say, go to the weather data up here, use the selected location from up here to get one of these three locations, then get the temperature out from whatever one got selected. Once you have the temperature, that's the whole right part of the equal. And then the left part of the equal is to say, go to the HTML, go find the current temp, set the inner HTML to all of the work that we did in here.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Jen, the easiest thing that I've seen, VS Code does not have a print option. If you copy and paste it into a Google Doc, you can set the font to Courier New and then print it out from there. There is surprisingly no good print tool that I know of.
That's a bummer. Be cool if you could just right click it and print it.
Yeah. Yeah, very dumb that you can't. There's a cool tool that I've used before that like generates a PNG and then you can print out the PNG, but copy and paste is probably the best way to go. All right, last call for questions. Beautiful. Have a great night, guys. I'll see you.